Hello there. You are very welcome to Your Play or Mine, the only podcast combining the worlds of creative arts and sport in one show. I am your host, Sarah Mackenzie Foley, and this is season 1, episode 8. My guest for this episode is Pat McCarry, who has largely been best known as a rugby journalist, but has decided to try his hand at not only writing a play, but at directing it too. He is the writer and director of Soldier Field, a play about the Irish rugby team's historic win over the All Blacks in Chicago in early November of 2016. So we're coming up on the 8-year anniversary of that now. And one of my biggest reasons for starting Your Play or Mine was because of the connections that I see between sport and the arts, and Pat's story is a fantastic example of that, so it was great to have the opportunity to speak with him. Without further ado, here is the latest episode of Your Play or Mine with Pat McCarry. Enjoy. Pat, you're very welcome to Your Play or Mine. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to having a chat there with you today.
Absolutely. And listeners will know that we always start the show with the same 3 kickoff questions to kind of get to know your sporting background a bit better. And the first one is, what's your very first sporting memory?
Yeah, for me, it was Euro '88, Ireland, the Ireland playing England, and it's kind of funny. I was probably 7 at the time, and yeah, like friends would have been really big into football. It took me a while. I grew up with 4 sisters, so sport wasn't a massive thing around the house. Like so,
Okay.
but I remember just like it kind of swept up the whole nation, and I was kind of getting into it at the time. And I think my dad got me like the goalkeeper jersey and stuff as well. So I remember watching the first half and then being so nervous that I the second half I just went out and played football, and I got updates through the window, like, and I'd go up to check every now and then. And I remember my next door neighbor, he was an adult now as well, but me and him, he was too nervous to watch as well. So the two of us were talking back and forth over the wall to each other during the game. Yeah,
Oh,
so
wow.
that was great. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's gas. Brilliant. It was too much. It was too much.
Yeah, and
Uh,
luckily they won as well. Like, so it's a good. I suppose if they had a loss, I might not have stayed in my mind, but because they won, it stayed in my mind. Yeah.
there you go. And who would you say is your personal sporting greatest of all time across any sport?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah, like for me, like soccer and rugby are kind of like two main things as well. Like I kind of always grew up with kind of like they wouldn't be the regular heroes, like like so for me growing up, maybe someone like Andrei Kanchelskis, who played for Manchester United, I would have loved
Hmm.
him. There's a guy who used to play for Inter Milan called Maurizio Gans. I think I my adulthood having stubble all the time has been inspired by him. He wasn't the best player in the world, but he get a few goals. And yeah, I love like Andy Cole, who played for Man United. I suppose there's a bit of a tread line there. My earliest hero would have been Packy Bonner as well, but yeah, I was trying to think of the greatest of all time, and like yeah, like Tiger Woods would be there. Like I kind of in those debates, I'd almost have to admit Messi's better than Ronaldo, but I kind of have that kind of love of Ronaldo as well. Maybe because he's a guy who worked harder to get where he was, or he always seemed to kind of like he this is through sheer kind of blood, sweat, and tears that he got to be one of the
Hmm.
best in the world. So, and then yeah, in rugby for me, maybe Dan Carter is somebody who's like best rugby player I've seen. And now I might be willing to switch to DuPont soon enough, especially if he keeps playing the way he is. But
Yeah,
Carter for me was the best player I ever saw. Yeah,
100% with you on that one. He's my favorite ever rugby player as well, I have to say.
yeah,
Yeah.
lovely guy as well. Yeah.
So sound, which
Mm.
is amazing. I love it. What's the most emotional sporting moment that you've ever experienced? It could be positive or a negative, kind of whatever sticks out.
Yeah, yeah. There was one, and this was I was only dating her at the time, but my wife Katrina, she was I'm convinced that she just pretended to take an interest in sport when we were going out with each other. She could not care less now that we're married. Like, but I remember the champions. Actually, I suppose it was the 1999 Champions League final when United played Bayern Munich. Just by sheer kind of like yeah. I remember we were watching it in a friend's house, and it looked like United were going to lose that game. But then all of a sudden, there was so many chances Bayern Munich had to wrap it up, and they just couldn't finish the job. And then you
Yeah.
start thinking in the back of your head, like maybe this isn't over. Like maybe this is their fate, because they were hitting crossbars, hitting posts, a little bit of everything. And And yeah, I remember when they got the equalizer through Sheringham, and some of the guys and our friends ran out onto the local green and were celebrating. And we set in and watched it. And as they were running back in, like we were running back out because they had scored the second goal. That's how quickly it happened. Like, so the guys were coming in and we were coming out, going, they've done it again, they've done it again.
Yeah.
And so that was one. And then, yeah, the one with, what I was talking about, Katrina, would have been, what was that, 9 years later when they beat Chelsea. And at the time, like I remember, because it was a penalty shootout as well. And I remember watching an Ireland penalty shootout in 2002, and we all linked arms for it, and we're all just big, we're all
Yeah.
in it together. And then we lost, and we all just kind of walked away from each other. But for this one, because we had the penalty shootout and we won, I remember just having my hands on my knees and feeling like I'd played the game myself. Like so yeah, they're big ones, and yeah, I remember even the Grand Slam maybe in 2009 as well, like in
Mm.
rugby, to bring it back to rugby as well. Like I think I ended up I don't know whether I was too livid about it or I was too living it too much that my sister and my dad watched it in the next room and I was in another room on my own because maybe I was going too ballistic as it was all happening. And that would make sense if I was a teenager, but I was in my 20s then. I should have been had a bit more self control. But yeah, those ones kind of would stand out to me then. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant, brilliant. I want to know kind of about your transition, I guess, into your playwriting and directing side of things because I had the director Andrew Gallimore on the podcast previously, and I asked him whether he felt like the role of a director is sort of like the role of a coach. Because from the outside in, I feel like that would be what
Mm.
you might assume. But his feeling was more that it's like an out half on a rugby field
Mm.
because you're kind of problem solving and you're pulling the strings as such. How do you view that role in the context of a team? Like, do you agree with Andrew? Do you think it is more of a coaching piece?
Yeah, I suppose it depends what you're doing. Yeah, like I probably would have thinking about it, having a bit of time to think about it. I might have said coach, like, but then I suppose he is the point. So maybe a bit of a kind of player coach would be the way where like you are able to personally influence things and change things over, but for a lot of it, you're going to have to show faith in people and kind of
Mhm.
um you'll do all you can, but then you have to kind of let them kind of find where they're going with it as well, and find their own way, like and you have to show people an awful lot of faith. So like yeah, maybe a player manager where um you're managing, you're on the sidelines, you're overseeing everything, but then maybe like you'd be tempted to put yourself on sometimes and see if you can influence events. Like yeah.
And how did you, I suppose, how did you approach even learning that? Was it just a trial by fire? Did you have people that you asked for advice? How did you go about it?
Yeah, well, the very first like play I ever did, like I always was into kind of theater, like kind of grown up. Like
Mm,
it's not like we would have went a lot, but um, to a lot of stuff. But yeah, I always would have like the pantos, like for us growing up was a big thing where like it would be a big family event on my mum's
yeah.
side of the family, and everybody would go. So maybe that's your first kind of live experience with it. And then I used to kind of love maybe when I was in college going to the Gate or something like that and seeing
Mm,
a show there and. I think I remember with my sisters going to see like Dangerous Liaisons and maybe it was the
mhm,
Gaiety or something like that. And it was brilliant. And so yeah, like I think my first one I did then was when I was in college and I went to Ballyfermot College of Further Education at the time it was called. And we all just had a media project to do and different people were they would manage a band for a few months or somebody would release a single or something like that, or somebody else would go and put a radio show together. And my one was I was going to write a script and do a whole treatment of, lighting and sound and stuff and costume. And then once I kind of had written the script, then I was just like, oh fuck, well, like why don't we just do it then? Like so.
yeah.
Like yeah, the first act of it was set in a garage, and so we ended up like my dad, like by trade, he was a mechanic and a panel beater for years, so we ended up using his garage.
Well,
Got seats from Sing Street School is around the corner from where his garage was. So we went and borrowed around 60, 70 seats from them and we lined them up in the garage and we set the whole thing there. And I was saying, like, yeah, like as I'm sure a lot of the folks you've chatted to already would say, like it was, I think you were working at it for like 2 months and there was a lot of stress and there was a lot of like, oh my God, what are we doing? And then I can't believe people are kind of come to see this now. And then by the end of it, all you can remember is that week or those few nights where you're kind of putting it on as well. Like so, yeah, that's how really I got into it. And then you just kind of learned from people as you kind of went along, and you picked up stuff from other people. Like it's probably a little bit different when sometimes you're doing like amateur theater as well. It's a bit different maybe from the professional stuff where you're dealing with people who've got kids and kind of they're working and like and you kind of like I've been in the actor's shoes as well sometimes where you've kind of acted in something and that you're giving it your best as well. Like so you're just trying to I suppose it's kind of how you deal with people like and some people have different ways of working. Like I was always remember being in a play and I kept waiting for the director to like I wanted him almost like I wanted him to explode and give out to everybody because we all needed a kick up the ass and like he kept threatening to do it and he never did it. Like he never
Yeah.
fully did it and the show went well in the end and stuff and so I kind of but then I'd been in the other shoes. Like I remember then talking to somebody about it and they said, okay, well maybe next time you're directing maybe you will fire off a rocket and give everybody like a but I don't know, I still haven't fully been able to do it. I still sometimes think or some people would say maybe you're too nice sometimes, but um, I'm sure they could see if they can't tell it through my words, maybe they'll see it in my face that I'm I'm losing faith in them or I'm losing the will to live or something. But yeah, so you just pick it up from people as you go along and yeah, you're always kind of like you're always learning and you kind of think you've got it figured out one time and you kind of and then all of a sudden you haven't and then that's why it's great to have people to lean on like and but I've done that in the past. Well, like not exactly having an assistant director, but you would have a person that you could like that you could trust and you can go to,
Mm.
and you could say that's not going well, and then they might get back and be able to they can get back and just be more direct with people, and then you would be in the background
Yeah.
like oh like so I have been guilty of using kind of proxies in the past to give people a bit of a start every now and then.
Yeah, but I feel like that's definitely something that happens on teams as well. I think because even sometimes when you think of teams that have, let's say, a captain that doesn't seem to be the most outspoken player on the
Mm,
field, but they lead in their own way, kind of by example, or, they're loud in the dressing room, but not on the field. And then they have other players around them that they sort of,
mm.
it's a leadership group as opposed to one person directing the whole show, which kind of makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and even like in like the most recent production there, like Soldier Field that we did, there was a guy called Paul Curran who's involved and he's just a guy who takes it seriously, like and he kind of loves doing what he's doing and he was the first guy, like sometimes then you love having somebody who's top of the class then. So like he was the
Mm.
first person to come off script and kind of come in and nail a scene 100% and then for me, I don't have to say anything to anyone else. Like everybody else then just goes, okay, we have to up it a little
Yeah.
bit here. Like so, it's great having people like that sometimes. Or, yeah, like I would have problems even like if you're giving a big speech to everybody, I would then kind of like almost ruin the speech at the end by going, "This is the most important thing in your life," and then at the end I'd say, "But it doesn't really matter. Have a good time." Like kind of like I dilute it completely as well. But yeah, no, it is great. Kind of yeah, treating it like a team and yeah, like as I probably mentioned, yeah, like as if you show a bit of faith in people, like it usually gets rewarded then as well.
Definitely. And I'm curious as well about the writing aspect of it because I mean, I've written things and tried to write things in the past, and I find starting and finishing are the two hardest bits. When you're in the middle and the ideas
Mm.
are flowing, it's great. Um,
Mm.
I'm curious whether you've ever gotten kind of white line fever in the process of writing something, where you're so close to the end, but you're just not quite happy. I think there's a tendency among creative people as well sometimes to you almost like the fear of it not being perfect kind of stops you from finishing. What's been your
Mm.
experience of that?
Yeah, like in terms of I kind of used to do it in a very kind of almost like a jigsaw sometimes. I would sometimes like some of the stuff I've written in the past, it would be like I would a scene, like the whole thing might start from even a line like that somebody is going to deliver or a back and forth with somebody, and but it wouldn't be at the start. It would be probably and I'd know it's halfway through, and then I'd know, but then I want to do this scene as well. So I might have like let's say if we're talking about like let's say a play that's 12 scenes, I might have all right, do number eight first, then go do four, then do nine, and then do two or something. And but
Mm.
I know in my head that I'll pull it all together eventually. But so it's been a bit like that. But yeah, I've done that as well. Where I think my closest experience to that would have been maybe when I was doing a like a writing a book before I'd written a play. It was called Paris to Picton, and we performed it in the New Zealand Comedy Festival. And like, yeah, very happy with the play, and it would have been great. And then in my head, I always remember thinking, like, you loved some of the characters so much. I was like, oh, I can turn that into a book,
Mm.
and the book is still like, maybe because it didn't get published, that kind of thing. Like, so I wrote it, and I wrote the whole thing. Maybe that's why I kind of it's you look back on something with a bit of a regret. But I kind of, as you said, I wasn't so sure of how I wanted to do it, so I just kept writing and writing, and it was turning
Mm.
into like, um, it's probably George R. R. Martin finished, Game of Thrones, like, like instead of getting to the point, you'd all of a sudden introduce this other character, and you'd go off down a like, a rabbit hole again, like so. So yeah, I've had that experience sometimes. Yeah, with plays. Um, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, you'll know yourself maybe that it's not 100% sure where you get there, but there's different ways. Because I remember reading a book. There was like William Goldman, like the great screenwriter, and I think he had put together a compilation from all these great screenwriters. And some people just have different ways of doing it, and some will, if they've got writer's block or that white line fever you're talking about, they'll just walk away from it and they'll come back to it in a while. Whereas other people feel that they need just to keep writing, like, and
Mm.
so again, everybody will find their own way. But yeah, with plays, not so much. But yeah, I've definitely experienced that as a writer, where like, yeah, the starting it isn't too bad, but yeah, the finishing it can kind of, as I said, like you get like you're welcome distractions almost, so you don't get to the finish
Mm.
line.
Mm. Definitely. I think it's interesting as well for me to see that you've mixed, I suppose, creative writing and journalism quite a lot, I think,
Mhm.
across your career, definitely more than I realized originally. Chatting to you, I think of journalism as being very objectively focused, whereas I guess creative writing is emotional and subjective. That's kind of the way I think about them.
Mhm.
How do you sort of like, do you find it fun having the two options? Like, do you think of them differently at all? Like, how does that play out in your head?
Yeah, I'm trying to think there. Yeah, like because there are certain like there's certain outlets I've even written for in the past where it is very much like you don't ever let yourself be in the story, like, or
Mm.
you never give an opinion. You're just there to report it. Here's A, B, C, and D of what happened. Um, but yeah, a lot of the kind of writing that I liked, and websites and places I work for, um, I'd love actually. I kind of don't mind the idea that like. No, I do love the fact that there's journalists out there that just do report the facts, and they tell you what the attendance was and what minute this was scored in. But like, some of my favorite writing are people who are just storytellers, and kind of,
Mm.
and they are emotive, and they do kind of paint a picture of like what it's like to be in the stadium when a big moment happened as well. Like, so maybe that's because that's the writing I love. And like, I'm trying to think in terms of journalism, someone like Vincent Hogan, who
Mm.
played like riff for the Irish Independent for years. Dion Fanning was another guy as well. You would just love their kind of stuff because they would tell you what it was like to be in the ground, or when a manager came into like a press conference, what he was drinking or what joke he made on the way out or something like that. So I kind of love that. And then there's a guy called Donald McCray, like, he's kind of written extensively on like he does a lot of sports, but like boxing and rugby. And he often puts himself in the story and kind of tells you what it was like to kind of be there. So that's just my own natural kind of inclination to the stuff that I like. But yeah, there is a lot of kind of journalism where um you just have to ask sometimes the tough questions, and you have to be the one to then just report it. And like, sometimes your temptation as a journalist is to, you want to, somebody kind of almost like, will say something crazy in a press conference or an interview, and the temptation is to, you want to, bury them, or you want to kind of expose it. But then sometimes you just have to let the words do the talking for themselves, and kind
Mm.
of, you just present it as fact, and then let the people make their mind up. And if it's crazy, if the quotes are crazy enough, I suppose that will come across as well. So yeah, like, sometimes I would even say that to people. I'm glad that there's a lot of journalists out there who are very much, um, like, they might be from Ireland, but if Ireland score a try or a winning goal, they will never celebrate. But I've been guilty of that in the past. Like, Johnny Sexton got that drop goal against France in 2018, and I lost a run of myself, like in Paris that day. And now it was only for around 10 seconds, but I was pounding the table, and then I had to try and straighten up and remember that I'm supposed to be this kind of, objective journalist. But yes, yeah, so I really don't mind it when subjectivity comes into it. But as I said, I do appreciate that there's, you can kind of divide it every now and then.
Totally. Yeah. I remember going to my first, having my first media pass for a match. And I actually asked a friend who had been doing it a bit longer, I was like, am I allowed to like clap or celebrate? Because after so long, so many years of standing there or
Mm.
sitting there, watching matches, I just knew myself that I wouldn't be able to kind of switch off the emotion of it and just kind of look at it as hard facts. So I think that is definitely, if you are, as you say, more on the emotive storytelling side, I think that's just a natural reaction, really. Like
Mm.
otherwise, I suppose we'd be robots.
Yeah, and that's I remember being at the World Cup in 2015 when Ireland got so excited after beating France and we thought we were going to go all the way, which we've
Mm.
taught a few times over the years. But when Argentina like really put a beating on us, and like a load of their journalists go to games in Argentina jerseys, like so
Wow.
they're not even pretending to be objective. Like, but then you're kind of just like saying, yeah, but and that's it. Like, because there's a lot of you. As I said, yeah, as long as there's somebody out there, as long as there's a few people, journalists, kind of just keeping it above the that cold eye in it and just reporting the facts. I love the people who kind of can go to an event and try and you feel like you were there when you're reading it. Like that's really good stuff. Yeah.
Totally. And talk to me then about Soldier Field, about, I suppose, the emotion of that and all the emotion that's come after it, obviously with Axel Foley passing away. And I know you just had a run of the show recently and Olive was there. And I think it's
Mm.
just such a wonderful story that, that moment and then also Axel has been kind of memorialized in this way on stage.
Yeah, like it was kind of as I said, like yeah, that kind of connection that I have from journalism and kind of yeah, like I love kind of doing creative stuff every now and then or getting involved with theater and putting something on. So I just kind of remember from that season, that whole kind of it was a kind of a time where like Razzie Erasmus came in, Anthony Foley kind of almost took a step back, was more of a coach than kind of like a almost like a director of rugby that Razzie was, and but he was still such a kind of like but he seemed like he was really enjoying the job. He had kind of the pressure was off him a little bit because you would have spoke to him in previous seasons and he was under a fair bit of pressure
Mm.
and then yeah like you could just as he seemed to be kind of really settling and happy with himself and kind of you would talk to him again and it was almost like that weight had lifted off his shoulders and Munster were starting to kind of put together a good team and then yeah because I just happened to be working that weekend and the news would have come true that he had passed away and it was just so shocking like for a guy who was as I said sometimes like he was like such a warrior for his team and like
Mm.
seemed to be this kind of Iron Man as well and he was the guy that you would kind of follow follow over the kind of like up over the
Over the
parapets and
top,
stuff like
yeah.
that as well. Like yeah, like so he it was such a shock to everybody. And then like as a journalist and even as a person, like I'd probably always remember that kind of months, 5 or 6 weeks around his passing and like the scenes down in Limerick where like his coffin would have been driven past Thomond Park and Shannon Rugby Club and then the kind of funeral, like being down myself at like going into UL and talking to Peter O'Mahony and Keith Earls and them being I don't know how they got through those press conferences, but like
Mm.
um yeah, like Keith having to stop to talk and leave the room for a minute and come back and then to go to Thomond Park and for them to beat Glasgow that day and kind of and all the kind of scenes at the end and players openly crying and stuff and then all of a sudden to kind of lead that into going and playing a team that you hadn't beaten for 111 years and like I think that was the magic moment of it that nobody really definitely nobody in the media knew that was coming, this figure of eight tribute that they were going to do to Anthony like on the pitch at Soldier
Mm.
Field. And I think Orla had said that yeah, like I think maybe it was a day before they did contact the family to let them know that they were planning something like but nobody really knew it was coming, and that's why it was almost such a shock to be there. And as like it was just like this wave that went around the ground where it was just like people were gradually realizing that they'd lined up in a figure of eight and that this was for Anthony and the big screen would catch up and you'd see Conor Murray and CJ Stander, Donncha Ryan and Simon Zebo all at the front and yeah, like and it was almost perfect in a way because yeah, the hack is all about like we're warriors, we're going to go up against you guys, and then here you were paying tribute to a like a fallen warrior ahead of it, like
Yeah.
so. Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, that was it swept everybody up, and there was such a kind of like the haka normally gives New Zealand such a lift, and
Mm.
yet here like the Ireland guys were going into it, and yeah, like it stood out, and so for me in my head, that whole period of time was I was kind of thinking like you're talking about making a start on stories. Sometimes I probably had that swirling around my head for like 12 months or 18 months, thinking it was just such fertile ground for like a story,
Mm.
not just a story about the players, but a player about the fans, and the whole thing was really sparked by a chat with some guy who had emigrated that I kind of knew from growing up, and he had to leave Ireland because he lost his job in the recession, like when the banking crash happened, and yeah, him and his family like just had to kind of go and move away, and they were living in Canada, and they headed down to Chicago to watch that game, and I remember, but he was. I'd seen him the night before, and then I saw him after it, and both times he was so convinced that Ireland were going to win, like, and he was like, "We've got this." And I was
Mm.
very skeptical. I thought if we had a chance, we might give him a go in Dublin, but I didn't think we were going to win over there in Chicago. So, but it all came from him saying, "No, we're like, these guys are away from. If you're back in Ireland, people will tell you that you can't do it and it
Mm.
can't be done. And if you have to go to New Zealand, it'd be far too tough. Everything will be going against you. But over here, like, you can make a new start for yourself. This is like the land of the dreamers over here,
Yeah.
and if you believe yourself, you can do it." So he really did believe it, and I remember seeing him then after the game that night, and then he gave me the same speech, but like much more drunk at the stage, and but but that stayed in my head, and I was always kind of thinking, yeah, like that'll be a main part of it, like his big speech about how anything is possible in America if you just kind of you work your ass off enough for it, like, and so that was a big part of it, and the other part was the Anthony Foley bit, and just how much that meant to the players, so a lot of the play is like it's either direct quotes or paraphrasing quotes from the players, like Conor Murray and CJ Stander and Rob Carney, and I picked Andrew Trimble then as well. Like, and so it's trying to pick four players, and you're switching back and forth between what's happening on the pitch, and then you're going up to the stands, and then you're getting the personal stories of
Mm.
people traveling the world over to see a game. Like, so, and you're trying to have a bit of a. It's supposed to be a bit like a match where you're supposed to be a bit wrecked by the end of it as well, and you're going up and down. You're having moments where you think you're going to do it and you're not as well. Like, so, and that's great that the audience has kind of reacted in that way, where like people will kind of really get behind you by the end of it, and they're cheering and singing and stuff like that. So that's probably the best kind of reaction we can get.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the hope, I suppose, of doing anything creative is that it's going to resonate with people and that, it's going to evoke that emotion. And I think certainly, I mean, even on its own, it could have been something emotional. And then I think when you add in the personal element to it, it's sort of it's kind of a magic moment, really. I think it really just captures that. Um, I have a closing question for each guest that I'm very interested to see
Hmm.
what your answer is. So the question is, what rule, ritual, or regulation would you try to cross over from rugby to, I'll give you the choice of either creative writing or journalism. You could do either or.
Well, um, yeah, I suppose the big thing I like about rugby is that um, they're always switching. Like, so, like if they think the game has got boring or something like that, they will do a rule change or law change, I should say, and they'll
Mm,
immediately kind of say, okay, we're going to address this as well. Like, and they're not too rigid, like, whereas a lot of some sports are kind of a bit, although GAA is kind of embracing that a little bit now as well, but some sports are like, well, this is the way it is, this is the way it's always been. But rugby will make tweaks all the time, and not be kind of
sure.
too rigid. Like, so, yeah, sometimes if you could kind of apply that to maybe, yeah, like the world of journalism or something, sometimes people are a bit like, well, this is the way it worked because it's always worked like this as well. And I kind of love people who come in, and as I said, like I have my own little likings for kind of people who are kind of more creative and that storytellers. And so, yeah, just if someone comes in, it's like, oh, well, it hasn't been done this way before. I kind of sometimes used to think that, well, if you're good enough and you back yourself, you can kind of do it your own way, or you can kind of forge your own paths. Like, so, I don't know if I could strictly enforce that across everybody, but maybe, yeah, maybe it is that sense of kind of just like, let's try something, and if it doesn't work, we'll go and do it another way. Like, but we don't have to be, within these kind of strict structures all the time as well.
That's such a good one. I haven't thought about it that way, and nobody else has thought about it that way either. And I'm curious to know now what you think of whether they should bring in the stopwatch in soccer because that absolutely wrecks my head, and I don't know why. I don't know why they won't deviate from the extra time. It's just it blows my mind.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, like, yeah, and I think that's it. Whereas, like, and you have to be willing to kind of put your hand up and say, okay, well, okay, that didn't work or something like that. And that's
Yeah.
why sometimes like I suppose history would show that like like people have plowed on stupidly for years by just being too stubborn to kind of admit that something's not working as well. Like so,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, I know, yeah, and that's it. Yeah, kind of, I like that when sports kind of borrow from each other and stuff as well. Like, but as I said, yeah, that's as I said. I think even from all my work, even whether it's theater or creative writing or writing books or journalism, um, yeah, I'm sometimes like a bit of a dreamer or something like that as well. So sometimes you do need people to kind of bring you. Maybe sometimes it is good to have guidelines every now and then, but sometimes I don't. I like painting outside the lines a little bit too.
for sure. A mix, I think, is the best way to go.
Yeah.
I mentioned it earlier, you've just finished a run of Soldier Field. But before I leave you go, I want to make sure that people know where to go if they want to find out more about the show or about yourself and your work. So feel free to blag whatever you wish to blag.
Yeah, like it's I suppose it's on social media. Like it's funny. I'm kind of Pat McCarry is what I kind of go by on kind of I think on Twitter. Like, and a lot of people get in touch with me that way. But I was saying, I think I'm now known, like my work name is almost Pat because there was no Patrick McCarry available on Twitter. I had to just go for Pat, and that's almost
Oh.
become my work. That's my work persona. Like, but I said my wife calls me Paddy, my family call me Patrick, my friends from Tala where I grew up call me Pajo and stuff like that. Like, but yeah, Pat McCarry is the way to find me. I think on LinkedIn and Twitter, and it's simple enough to find me on Gmail. Sometimes you get lovely, it's just Patrick McCarry at gmail.com, and I got a lovely one off a lady who went to see the show there only a couple of weeks ago, and she had just said it was just this lovely kind of personal message of saying, it felt like her and her husband had went to see the game, and it really brought back all the memories of kind of seeing it and how good it was. And then she said, like, little did she know that a few years after that game in Chicago, her own husband would pass away at an early age as well, and
Oh,
so she was
wow.
kind of saying, it's kind of she was saying you captured a lot of the kind of how tough it is, but how family gets you through and stuff like that. And she was going, but I was able to kind of relive all those memories of being at that game with my husband by just going to
Mhm.
that play. Like so, yeah, like that's the kind of stuff you do it for. Like sometimes people reach out and get onto you that way. But yeah, like I think in terms of away from myself, we're hoping to bring the show down to Limerick early next year. Looking to bring it to the Lime Tree Theatre in February, mid-February. We haven't locked in the dates yet, but it should be around mid-February. So you can just check out their website for that. And then the group that we're doing it with at the moment is the Salons Dramatic Society. Like, so you can find out details there. And yeah, maybe if we keep going well, we'll get our own website for it as well. But for now, those places will do. Yeah.
Brilliant. So look, we're going to leave it there for this episode, but Pat, it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you so much for coming on and for taking the time.
No worries, Sarah. Yeah, lovely talking to you as well.